So a very good morning to you all. My name is Christina Jansen from the Scottish Gallery, and this is one of our fabulous events celebrating 125 years of exhibiting women artists for modern masters women. And this morning we have with us James Knox, who was formerly the managing director of the Art newspaper and currently the director of the Fleming Art Foundation since 2015. Established in 2000, the foundation owns one of the most significant collections of privately owned Scottish art. Prior to working at the Art newspaper, James ran his own arts consultancy, and he is the author of several books on subjects including Robert Byron, Osbert Lancaster, and the Scottish Country House. Since joining the Fleming Collection in 2015, he has transformed how the collection is accessed by the public and has worked tirelessly to loan the Fleming Collection, as well as mounting several touring exhibitions, including the Scottish Colourists. James also published a pocket collector's book on the Scottish Colourists. The Fleming Collection are exhibiting the Glasgow Boys and Girls at the Granary Gallery, Berwick-upon-Tweed in September. So from the 5th of September to the 15th of November this year, you can see a much bigger selection of what James is just about to talk about. So the Fleming Collection website has also been working tirelessly since lockdown to open up the world of art to its audience, which includes a wonderful weekly series which I've been following, My Favourite Scottish Work of Art, which has so far featured Alison Watt, Ian Rankin, Joanna Lumley, Neil McGregor, Kirsty Wark, Michael Portillo and James Naughty. This morning, James is going to reveal his fascination with the Glasgow Girls. Please get your questions in now because we might have a couple of minutes at the end, and I'm just going to hand you over to James. Good morning, welcome, and off you go.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very privileged to be here speaking to you from Ayrshire. I'm going to begin my talk on the Glasgow Girls with, and if we could have this up straight away, Christina, please, with this wonderful artist wearing this wonderful hat called Flora Mcdonald Reed. And if we could move on straight away, there we are, to this painting, which I argue is one of the most important paintings of the first phase of the radical movement launched by the young Scottish painters in the 1880s, commonly referred to as the Glasgow Boys and Girls, who rebelled against the jaded Victorian passion for Highland scenes and storytelling pictures in favour of unadorned depictions of contemporary rural life. But this example is not by any of the usual suspects, as I've already intimated, such as James Guthrie, Edward Walton or George Henry, but by a forgotten artist, Flora Mcdonald Reed. Before going further, I must point out I'm about to mention, shock horror, the city of Edinburgh in the same breath as the Glasgow Boys, as the term is something of a misnomer. What links the artists of that school, many but not all of whom sprang from in and around Glasgow, was their shared absorption of the lessons of the French realist painters Courbet, Millet, and most potent of all, their heir, Jules Bastien Lepage, who was hailed as the inventor and leader of the naturalist painting. Another non-Glasgow painter closely associated with the boys was Arthur Melville, who sprang from East Lothian. Now let me introduce you to Flora Mcdonald Reed. Born in 1861, she trained at Edinburgh School of Art, and at the age of just 22, painted field workers in 1883, documenting with a dispassionate eye the contemporary reality of rural life. In the same year that Reed painted field workers, her male contemporaries were exploring similar themes at the artist colonies at Grez-sur-Loing near Fontainebleau and Coburn's Path in Berwickshire, where Walton and Guthrie also chose potato pickers as a subject. Reed's ambitious work, 1 metre high, most likely painted in northern France, is equal to other set-piece compositions of the school, such as Guthrie's To Pastures New and Lavery's Under the Cherry Tree. There is another link with Guthrie, in that he, like Reed, also learnt from her brother, John MacDonald Reed, who was a painter of rural subjects, but lacking his younger sister's documentary French edge. Reed went on to have an international exhibiting career and commercial success, and in its day, Field Workers was shown at avant-garde exhibitions in London. Unfortunately, this beautiful, progressive painting had no such luck with the 2010-11 exhibition of the Glasgow Boys at Kelvin Grove and London's Royal Academy. But this will now be corrected with the Fleming Collection show at Berwick-upon-Tweed, which brings Reed back into the foreground as one of the pioneers of Scottish naturalist painting. I should also add that in her later career, she was instrumental in founding the Society of Women Artists, providing professional accreditation for women. Next. This is a photograph of Bessie Mcnichol, dressed in wonderful 1860s costume. And if we could move on straight away to the next image, please. This is Bessie Mcnichol's famous portrait of Glasgow boy Edward Hornell, painted in 1896 in his studio in Kirkcudbright, surrounded by his collection of kimonos, robes, and hanging scrolls from his recent visit to Japan. The focus of Mcnichol's portrayal falls on the finely modelled head, suggestive of both determination and hidden depths of this impulsive, hard-drinking and sweary character. While the rest of the canvas, the screen of Japanese figures, the oversized collar and tie, the black expanse of jacket, the palette and brushes, is so loosely and expressively painted as to verge on the abstract. In fact, I often think the tie and the collar remind me of a painting by James Soutine of the early 20th century. The two artists had struck up a bantering relationship while the portrait was underway, to the extent that Glaswegian gossips hinted at an affair, dismissed by Mcnichol. However, she was not immune to Hornell's love of impasto and decorative pattern, inspired by his own passion for maverick French painter Monticelli, which she deployed along with a touch of Whistlerian panache to convey the sitter's farouche personality, achieving that rare combination of a vivid likeness and a standalone work of art in one of the most cutting-edge portraits of the Glasgow School, which can now be seen at the National Trust for Scotland's Hornell House in Kirkcudbright. Mcnichol had been born and brought up in the city, where her father was a headmaster. She enrolled at Glasgow School of Art in 1887 and studied painting for 5 years under the inspired tutelage of the headmaster and director, Frances Fra Newbury, who, as an emancipist of female talent, unlocked the next phase in the Glasgow Renaissance. Newbury's charismatic leadership, which encouraged male and female students equally, is best known for his nurturing of the brilliant constellation of female artists, designers, and makers, led by Margaret and Frances Mcdonald, Jessie M. King, and his future wife, Jessie Newbury. Confusingly, this group, which emerged from Newbury's design and decorative art department, and the slightly earlier group of painters, including Bessie Mcnichol, who studied drawing and painting, have all been bundled under the now slightly patronizing label Glasgow Girls, even though their careers rarely overlap. The term was invented by the brilliant curator Jude Berkhauser as the title of her breakthrough 1988 exhibition at Glasgow School of Art on Women in the Art School 1880 to 1920, and for her follow-up book in 1990, which remains the gold standard. Her hijacking of the well-known Glasgow Boys moniker was the only way she could turn the spotlight on the women artists and designers whose dazzling achievements had been forgotten. Of the painters, Mcnichol was the star. Following her rigorous training at Glasgow, she studied briefly at Collarossi's atelier in Paris, where, according to a friend, her individuality was not given a chance. She was restrained and repressed rather than encouraged. She went on to become a supreme painter of women, often set against a backdrop of dappled foliage, as in this wonderful, powerful portrait entitled A Girl of the 60s. And this positioning of women against foliage was a familiar motif of fellow Glasgow painters, especially Guthrie, Walton, and Mcnichol's contemporary from Glasgow School of Art, Gold. The Girl 60s at Kelvin Grove was inspired by Pinero's 1998 Trelawney of the Wells, a play set in the 1860s, and reflects Mcnichol's own love of fashion and costume. First exhibited in 1900, although painted in 1898, this work drew one critic to confirm her status as a French-inspired realist painter. Fittingly, her less formal paintings are next. Her less formal paintings of fashionably dressed women, such as this wonderful portrait entitled Lamplight, which is at the Hunterian, which is dated around 1895, which reflects the Glasgow School's move away from depicting rural life to Glasgow city life. This suggests the influence of French realist par excellence, Edouard Manet. Like her male peers, but with greater warmth, Mcnichol produced a series of fin de siècle swagger portraits of women, hatted, veiled, muffed and beribboned, that capture the energy and confidence of the new woman. This is a term which was much talked about in the press at the time, of this newly independent, free-spirited woman across the great cities of Britain. Mcnichol was indeed a free spirit, dressed in crisp blouses with her hair pushed inside a man's cap, who loved the new sport and attire of bicycling, who refused to join the Glasgow Society of Lady Artists, and who lamented the grime of her St. Vincent Street studio when writing to Edward Hornell, adding, "not to mention my white elephants in way of unsold pictures." Although Mcnichol might not have met with huge commercial success, she did meet right through the second half of the 1890s with huge international success, touring along with the Glasgow Boys across Europe and America, where they were hailed as the new school of cutting-edge artists. Tragically, Mcnichol died in childbirth in 1904, aged just 35. A handful of talented women artists of her generation, such as Stans Mordine, Catherine Cameron, and Constance Walton, were left to carry the flame. Next. Here is an example of Constance Walton's work, which I spotted in my local auction house in Ayr last autumn and acquired for the collection. Born into Glasgow's creme de la creme of creativity, her brother Edward was the leading Glasgow boy. Her other brother George worked with Charles Rennie Mackintosh, while her sisters Hannah and Helen were leading ceramicists. And for good measure, her niece was Cecil Walton, the great painter in the 1920s. Trained in Paris, Constance Walton was a talented watercolourist influenced by the Scottish masters Melville and Crawhall. This watercolour, which perhaps carries a later title, it's called Daydreams, but I think that was made up by a later owner, depicts a glum child staring blankly into the distance, which is a look often captured by the Glasgow painters as indicative of the very dispassionate, impassive look of their subject. So they are not wanting to project any sort of story or anecdote onto the composition. And this glumness was achieved par excellence by their god, James McNeill Whistler, whose portrait of Cicely Alexander was so glum that it caused an absolute uproar when it was exhibited in London. Walton's figure studies are relatively rare, as her marriage, as following her marriage, she decided to concentrate on painting exquisite watercolors of flowers. a curbing of talent due to the responsibilities of marriage and family, which faced countless women of the period. My final choice next, and here is the artist of my final choice, Sam Ainslie. Next. My final choice fast forwards to 1987. Sam Ainslie's They Shall Reap the Whirlwind was shown that year in the Vigorous Imagine exhibition at the Scottish National Gallery of Modern Art, which proclaimed the arrival of the new Glasgow boys and girls, such as Stephen Campbell, Stephen Conroy, Gwen Hardy, and Ken Curry, who, like their predecessors, were making radical waves through their approach to figurative painting. Ainslie's work also inspired the banner, which you see in the photograph beneath, which was hung across the great classical portico of the Scottish National Gallery of Modern Art. And by so doing, by deploying this figure, which she calls warrior woman, onto the banner, onto that very trad classical portico, Sam Ainslie was literally nailing her colours to the mast as a feminist artist. As her warrior woman, it acts as a warning to the patriarchy that it is they who shall reap the whirlwind. This work was created 100 years ago, since Bessie Mcnichol had enrolled at Glasgow School of Art, and it leaves one asking, how much has been achieved and how much more is there still to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we're not quite finished with you. That was a fantastic, these little 10-minute, there's such nuggets. I know you've gone over a little, but I could listen to you for another hour, and there's so much to learn. So you're doing the Glasgow Boys and Girls in Berwick, so just explain, or just give us a little taste of how that's going to, how you've put that together from the Fleming Collection, James.
Well, we had been planning this for early last year, and it was due to open in May, and of course has been postponed. So it's utterly thrilling that we can now open on the 5th of September. The Fleming Collection had always been very, they started buying art. The collection was founded in 1968 to hang paintings in the Fleming Private Family Bank. But soon it morphed into this museum quality collection because they bought so brilliantly so early on, which means that the core of the show will come from our own collection with some wonderful Arthur Melvilles, a dazzling lavery of the Glasgow International 1888 exhibition, and of course Flora Mcdonald Reed, and all the boys are there represented. We were planning to add to it from public loans, but I'm afraid the COVID drama put paid to that. So sadly, we're not able to show Flora Mcdonald Reed's, Bessie Mcnichol's portrait of Hornell from the NTS, but we have from private collection a wonderful, dazzling little dandy portrait of an 1890s lady of fashion. And we have actually added, in light of not being able to get works from public collections, some really wonderful works that have never been seen before from private collections. So in many ways, it will be almost more interesting because it will give people the chance to see works that you don't see in the standard books and the standard galleries. So it's very exciting.
It is, plus it's a really great location. I mean, one of the things that I really liked about the Scottish Colourist exhibition there, because it is a granary, it's very low, so the hang's very low. So quite often pictures, they're a little bit out of your reach, or they feel quite ethereal. But in this venue, you feel like you're stepping into the pictures, and it's incredibly intimate. So, so I'm really looking forward to it because it's a great venue. And now I know that you're writing a book, and that's going to join. Is this going to be part of the same suite as the Scottish Colourist book?
Yes, it's the same format, same lovely low price, £9.95, packed with wonderful illustrations from the Fleming Collection and elsewhere. And I've pulled together a text which I hope summarizes their originality and their daring and their dash. I've had a wealth of obviously well-known sources to draw from, but it's been very good discipline to really condense it into a short book. So I hope you'll all enjoy that.
Well, we'll certainly be getting those, and we can take orders for signed copies as well, James. So we're delighted to have those in the gallery. I've got one question from our audience, and I've got someone wondering about the artist Catherine Cameron. I'm just wondering if you can make a...
Well, she wasn't. Oh, you mean Catherine Cameron? Absolutely. And I'm sorry I couldn't illustrate her work. We've got what she will be showing, obviously, at Berwick, which, by the way, is just a few miles from Coburn's Path, the artist colony where they all painted. And so it's got very good local relevance. And I've borrowed a marvellous Walton of the Cobarth Cove. So that's good news. Catherine Cameron was sister of D.Y. Cameron and was a wonderful botanical artist of great beauty and freshness. She grew up, she knew from an early age she was always going to be a painter. And she was. And again, she's one of those painters who's incredibly good and wonderful, but rather overlooked. So it's nice to be able to show her in Berwick.
James, thank you so much for all the work that you've put into this morning. And this is where we leave you. I'd obviously love to have a wonderful tour of your bedroom there, where you're studying. But we don't have time.
There's a real head bone behind me, and there's a D.Y. Cameron behind my head.
But I've got a feeling that we'll do a nice online book launch with you. So if we can't bring people together, we're going to find another way, just as you have done. Please log on to the Fleming Collection every week, because they're doing really lovely, amazing, exciting things, and it keeps us all occupied during these strange times. James, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a privilege. Bye.
Bye-bye.